to talk about how challenging it can sometimes be to explain your magic. And when I say magic, I'm talking about that special or unique talent or ability or skill that you have that is really you. So that can range from, being an artist and a graphic designer and having a vision for what that image is supposed to look like, and then struggle to explain that to people. I cannot express how many times I'm talking to a client and they're describing their logo design, for instance, and or at least a feeling that they want the design to have, and I can very sort of easily imagine what that looks like. And so I'm trying to explain it to them and they don't get it. They're not seeing what I'm seeing. Or another example of that might be, I'm working with a client on their website or whatever, and they want to change the background to yellow. And I can once again very instantly see, oh, if we make it yellow, it's going to compete with this and the text is not going to be legible, and it's going to, visually collide with this picture. And so explaining that can sometimes be really hard, either because people don't want to accept that advice, and they're really curious and they want to see it from themselves. Totally valid. Or because they just can't picture it. They're like, well, I need to see it to understand it, to believe it, to whatever it, right? To process it. And so it can show up like that in really sort of practical ways, especially in my line of work in design. But sometimes it's harder to explain. Sometimes it's more abstract than that. Sometimes it's explaining your magic that is not as common, right? Being an artist or a designer, there's a lot of artists and designers in the world. But what about the magics that are not as acceptable? Like being highly intuitive and highly sensitive and knowing things and understanding things that are not as easily accessible to everyone. For example, and I don't even talk about this very much for this reason, right? Because it's hard to explain. I remember, for as long as I can remember, ever since I was a little girl, I would experience things, or rather see things that not everybody could see. And this could be a flash of color that I understood to mean something, or a fog, or like what I can only interpret as a spirit of a person walking by, or a flash right before my eyes, like the way that I'm able to see this glass, like very literal, or sometimes a flash of something in my mind, much how like when we remember a scene in a movie, we can very clearly depict that scene in the movie and see it very clearly in our mind's eye, even if it's not like right in front of our face. So that's definitely one of my magics, right? Is to be able to see, just to see things. I'm not really somebody who like feels, like people often say, "Ooh, that doesn't feel right." Like I'm not really a feeler so much. I mean, I am, but my stronger skill, if you will, is just seeing what's coming, seeing the words, seeing the images, seeing the colors, seeing the designs, and or seeing the spirits, or getting those little nuggets of insights into the past or the present or the future. And that's a hard thing to talk about and to explain. It makes me sound like, I don't know, some character from a Harry Potter movie or something. And it's absolutely not like that. But I think that's the other challenge, that when people think of psychic abilities or magic abilities, we either go into sort of a default disbelief, what are you talking about? Or we equate it to whatever we've seen in movies, or we want to test and challenge it, right? Like that's very common. And it's super uncomfortable. And so what I mean by that is, like, I've had private conversations with good friends, where I've shared about some of my experiences, and then a common response is, oh well, can you see something right now? Can you talk to my dead grandfather and, like, immediately go into mediumship and sort of perform right on the spot? And it's uncomfortable because you might be sharing from a place of vulnerability, or from a place of just wanting to talk to a friend, or whatever. And then when you're asked to sort of prove it, or perform, or do it for me, give me insights into my future, it's fucking weird. Like, it's at least for me, like, that's not how it works. I feel like that magic shows up and is most authentically and sincerely expressed when it's not performative, and when it's not on demand, but instead when it is done with a really sort of sacred intention. um, that example feels very different, say, than being with a client and grounding and centering and carving out this time and space for us to very intentionally look inward or beyond and find answers to the questions you seek. Like, that's different than that's creating a sacred space for me and my clients to, or me and my friends, to connect with our spirit, with that thing, that divine power, that source. That's very different, right? Dropping into that space intentionally versus, ooh, show me. How is that? Or I'm thinking of, I feel like I'm not being super concise in my thoughts here, and that just kind of goes to emphasize the point that I was trying to make at the very beginning of this conversation, which is how difficult it is sometimes to express your magic, to talk about your magic, to communicate with people authentically and sincerely without getting weird about it, without having to prove yourself, without having to over explain yourself, but rather just being. So if I were to say, oh, I'm an artist, not many people are going to challenge that. Not many people are going to be like, oh, prove it. Show me a picture of one of your paintings. Or better yet, paint right now in front of me so that I can see that you did paint that you did do that you can do that. Like, when you talk about your magic in terms of art, most people are gonna, like, be cool about it. But then when you talk about your magic when it comes to your psychic or intuitive or spiritual or otherwise harder to explain abilities, like, that's when people can get really weird by either not believing you, challenging you, testing you, or the opposite end of that spectrum, being so in immediate belief and fascination that they're like, oh my goodness, how does this work? I have a million questions. Tell me everything, show me everything. How do I do it? Like, And I'm not saying that there's like anything wrong. I'm not trying to point any fingers. I'm just trying to create a space for other magical beings to vent and talk and share about your experiences with these kinds of things. And I'm genuinely curious, how do you handle that? How do you steer the conversation respectfully and lovingly to support their curiosities while also protecting and caring for yourself? And as somebody who has been there, I have two sort of approaches to this. I either avoid the conversation entirely because I feel like if I'm in a situation where I feel like, oh, this is going to be one of those times, we don't need to go there. And so I won't bring up my gifts or talents or magic or whatever. Or if I feel like I am in a safe space where there's there is that space to talk about it, then I might just explain that's not how it works, or I'm not really in a position right now to tap into that. I have a ritual, I have a way I like to go about things, I have a process I like to um, exercise when I'm dropping into that channeling state, or that, yeah, channeling state. So where am I going with all of this? I had a friend who like heard me talking about this and was immediately super curious, super fascinated, and went into the, oh, can you talk to my grandfather who passed away, and what is he saying, and does he have any messages for me, and can you recall, can you like a memory from my childhood and tell me about it? Who like went immediately into that, and I felt pressured to perform. And I remember we were like having dinner and I was eating and all of a sudden I felt like pressure to like conjure up her loved one that had passed away so that I could prove myself. And um and I remember like receiving some inkling of something, but it was very unclear and it was very fuzzy. And then I remember feeling bad about myself and feeling like, oh no, I failed, and I wasn't able to like put on a show, and I wasn't able to deliver in this moment on the spot. And then taking it a step further and then questioning myself. Can I really do this? Is this a skill I possess? Am I full of nonsense? Like all of these questions that in the moment felt like really present. But then looking back, I think that was just the anxiety of the situation. I'm bringing this up because I don't want you, please, 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 to doubt or question your skills, whatever they may be, as practical or as abstract as it may be, just because you found yourself in a situation that challenged you in a weird way. That's going to happen sometimes, and that can show up in so many different ways. It's important that when we do come across bumps or awkwardness or challenges, that we chuck it up to just that. Well, that was an awkward moment, and keep it moving. Just because in that moment with my friend, I wasn't able to summon up whatever messages while stuffing my face and having what I thought was going to be like a really nice casual dinner, doesn't mean that I am not really skilled in this area. Another example is just because let's pretend I was at the same dinner, and instead of some sort of mediumship request. The request was for me to quickly design a logo for a new business. That's not how that works necessarily either. Yes, there were moments where visual images and artwork and designs very quickly like whoosh, drop in, and you're able to sketch it out on a napkin at the restaurant very easily because inspiration struck in a really specific way. Great. But that's not necessarily how it always works. And I have designed hundreds of logos. And even now, even to this day, I have a process. I like to create a really nice space and light a candle and kind of clear my mind and be alone and focus. And I have like certain pens that I like to doodle with, and a certain pad I like to doodle on. Like I have a process. And so if I were at that same dinner and a friend requested I design the most perfect logo and I wasn't able to deliver, I wouldn't then go home and question myself and my abilities. I would just chuck it up to, yeah, of course I wasn't able to perform at my very best in that moment because I wasn't really in the space for that. So I feel like I've jumped all over the place. But if you take nothing from this jumbled message, if you're going to walk away with something, let it be this: whatever your gifts are, whatever your magical abilities are, own it. And don't be shy. Don't be afraid to say, I am magical. I am so fucking magical. I am gifted. I am talented. I am really good at this. I am an expert at this. I know this because I've done it a million times and I've done it well. Don't be afraid to claim that just because you were in a situation where you were faced with skepticism or questioned in a weird way, or maybe even in a well-meaning way. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes we find ourselves in situations where that happens. That doesn't have to mean anything. That's not something you have to carry and make your own. So believe in yourself because you know you. You can trust you. And if Sally or Joe Schmo didn't necessarily believe you, that's okay. You're not gonna always please everybody. I don't even think that's possible. So please don't let that make you question your abilities. Don't question that you are a really good artist just because this person didn't like your art. Don't question whether you are a writer just because your book didn't get published. Don't question your abilities just because in that given moment you weren't in the optimal position to perform, because you got this. You got this. I'm so curious for any thoughts you have on this. I feel like I'm talking to myself in a way. In this very moment I am. But I'm also really, really talking to you, and I'm very curious what you're thinking about this, and if you have examples in which you have questioned your abilities because of something someone did or said. All right, that's it for now. Stay curious, stay ridiculous, be brave, and own your magic.